On today's Over 50s Wisdom, the topic of conversation is the emasculation of the military. Now, then, this is a very interesting, deep, and involved topic. I don't know a great deal about it, but I do know a man who does. Bill Cunningham. Good to see you, Bill.
Likewise, good to see you, David. This is going to be fun. You can tell by the hat, I'm a combat veteran. I served in the United States Navy from 1986 to 1994. My job, or rate as we call it in the U.S. Navy, was called a fire control technician. Now, this has nothing to do with fighting fires. My job was to start them. I was the weapons specialist. My job was to aim and fire the missiles, the big deck guns, the 50 cals, your M-deuces, your small arms, whatever. My job was to put the weapon onto the target. So I was I was in combat. I served in the Gulf War. I was in the Straits of Hormuz the very day Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. I was there for the whole thing. I was, lobbing tomahawks into Baghdad. I'm doing shore bombardment in support of marine activities. I'm doing, small boat attacks. I'm on the 50 cals. So, and I was in the military in a very interesting time because it was the transition between the old military and the modern military. It happened right around there. And I can even name a date to it, because there was, of course, in the military, women serving prior to that time. You can go back to World War II, World War I, etc., and even into the 19th century. It wasn't uncommon for a woman to serve in the military. However, they didn't serve in combat roles. They were in support roles. They would be part of the medical corps or the supply corps or something like this. And this is important because one thing, and you're a married man, I'm a married man. One thing that we know is that men and women are in fact different.
No.
Yes. Physically, mentally, emotionally, we are different. In fact, my wife's right now, Nap is still asleep in the bedroom, but I will tell you that her and I, we are not equal. My wife is not my equal. Now, keep this in mind. The word equal has nothing to do with value. It has, if you look at the word, it only means not the same. We are different. I don't treat my wife like my equal. I don't want to bring her down to my level. She's better than that as far as I'm concerned. And that's natural for a man to feel that way, not only about his own wife, but about women in general. We are protectors. We're designed to get out there, get dirty, get hurt, get cut, and to do what it takes to ensure that our ladies can run our home and have the things that they need to do that, and can support us in the work that we do. Now, this has a lot to do with the military mind. Being someone, and I've been in combat. I have a lot of friends from the Vietnam era that have been in combat. And the thing is that if there's a woman in a combat situation, you're no longer focused on the enemy. You're focused on the lady.
In what way, Bill? In protecting her? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it actually distracts from the job of combat, which was why women weren't allowed in combat. Now, this actually changed in 1991.
Have you experienced actually this happening?
I personally have not. I do have friends of mine who are younger that served and have experienced this.
So subsequently after the Gulf War.
Right.
Yeah.
It happened specifically in September of 1991.
Wow.
There was an event that happened in the U.S. military. There is a group of Navy and Marine Corps pilots it's an informal fraternity called the Tailhook Society that has existed since the 1950s. And this was made up of those pilots that had qualified to actually take off and land from an aircraft carrier. Okay. Now, the Navy decided to allow women to become aircraft carrier pilots.
Right.
In non-combat roles at that time. They were in support roles, but they could qualify to take off and land from a pilot or from a carrier. And this made them part of the Tailhook fraternity. Notice fraternity. And so in September of 91, they had this group got together of pilots. And one of the things that they would do and had done for decades is if you were new to the organization, to the group, and just got your carrier wings, you would have to do what's called run the gauntlet. Hallway down in a hotel somewhere, all the other guys are there, and they're gonna punch you, they're gonna grope you, they're gonna take their hand, they're gonna smack the pin on your and all of this sort of things. They're just gonna abuse you, and this was the initiation. Well, in September of '91 was the first time that there were women running this gauntlet.
Did they actually run the gauntlet?
Yes. Well, because this is that's what we do. It's a man's club.
Okay.
Oh boy, there was three, I believe it was three women, female pilots that ran this gauntlet, and they complained to their congressman.
Okay.
And they complained to the Department of Defense and saying, look how degrading this was, that we as women had to go through this. Now for men, we've been doing it for decades. That's a man thing. However, man things from that in the military became anathema. They began to legislate them out.
Okay.
And there was a whole re-education, not just in the United States Navy and Marine Corps, but across the U.S. military and also the NATO affiliated militaries around the world.
So was this a knock-on effect from the American military from that moment in September 91? From that moment, and then right across the Western world, their militaries, Britain included.
Britain included. You had to desensitize your military to allow for women.
Okay, so what you're saying is the military was a male-dominated zone. We know that from history. It's always been that way. So from 91, they try to reinvent it to make women, as you say, equal to men in all roles. Now, was it a good idea in principle?
No.
And in practice, what has happened?
No, not a good idea in principle. Okay. Again, women are different from men. We're physically different. Men have a lot of upper body strength. We're designed to do heavy work, heavy lifting, etc. Women are not designed for that.
Okay.
And that doesn't make them better or worse. It just makes them different. They're designed for different work. You know, if I want to nail a hammer, put a hammer in a piece of wood, I will grab a hammer to do that. If I want a cup of tea, I'm going to grab a teacup. But I'm not going to use a hammer to drink tea, and I'm not going to use the cup to pound a nail. Okay, they're different tools for different things.
Okay, so there was an attempt here to modernize the military, and you're saying it's all gone very badly wrong.
Very badly wrong.
That was one instance in September 91, which you could kind of just like brush over.
No.
What happened since?
There we go. What happened since? What we have now, because of that, the integrating of women into the military has been progressively changing military culture, getting it away from the masculine, we fight each other so that we know how to fight the enemy.
Yeah.
Into being the kinder, gentler military.
Okay.
And that everyone has to be sensitive to one another. And frankly, soldiers are not designed to be sensitive.
Soldier needs to be trained to kill.
Yeah. And there's an incident that happened a couple of years ago that really, to me, exemplifies this just foolishness. And this was, again, a couple of years ago, there was a senatorial committee because there were some more women that complained, Army women. And the complaint was this, that the field pack that a soldier has to carry into battle contains, your armor, your clothing, your combat boots, your weapon, your ammunition, your bedroll, all this other stuff that you have to wear into combat. And all combined weighs about 80 pounds. And so the senatorial subcommittee was coming together to decide whether or not to change the requirement for a soldier on how much weight they could carry, to make it only 40 pounds because the women couldn't carry that much weight. So this general goes to the senatorial committee to testify and to give his opinion. And the general said this, he said, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the soldier's field kit does not discriminate. It is 80 pounds. whether you're a man, a woman, or whatnot, if you're going to go into combat, you have to be able to carry it because that's what you need to survive. It's not about whether you're a man or a woman. It's like, can you do the job? This was how the generals took it, and they still lost. And the Senate changed the requirements.
Is this putting men off from joining the army?
Absolutely. And if you look at the current, if you go onto the games, because there's a lot of video games you can play on your phone, whether, from Candy Crush to Mine Zone and other stuff. And they have, most of them have advertisements. And the advertisements that you see now, at least on American media, are going to be focusing on minorities and women.
To join the army.
To join the army.
So this is what the
Air Force, or the Marines, or the Coast Guard, or the fill in the blank.
So this is what the American military want now, as opposed to rough, tough men who want to be soldiers. They don't really want them. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Now the military is designed for people who are of all kinds, men, women, whoever. And you get to go and play around, and they give you an education, and then they'll help pay for your college. That's not a fighting force.
It doesn't sound like a military. What is it? And is it a worry on the world stage? What are our potential adversaries thinking when they look at the state of the military as you describe it?
There's how they're looking at us is twofold. Number one, we have the best equipment. Absolutely. But when you go back to World War World War II, prior to America joining the war, and we entered the war December 7th, of course, from the attack from the Japanese. But the reason the Japanese attacked us, there was a number of reasons, economic and such, but one of the social reasons was that they believed at that time that American soldiers were just lazy playboys that wouldn't fight. Okay, because look at just how debauched our society is. And so Japan entered into World War II believing that inevitably the United States would seek for peace because they just didn't have a fighting spirit. Now, though this was proved incorrect in 1941, but now we're in 2023, and in the military, being a man is a problem.
That sounds like the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard, because it should be the absolute opposite.
It should be the opposite.
Man is the solving of problems, I would have thought, in the military.
Right. And that's no longer part of military society. In fact, it's not part of a general society for that matter, but it's being reflected in the military. And although we have all these great weapons, those weapons that we have do not win wars. They might win battles, but ultimately it's the soldier on the ground that wins the war.
And does the military, Bill, do they expect a certain percentage now of women or other minority groups in the military? Are they making demands that doesn't matter how good you are as a man, how enthusiastic you are, how determined you are, if you don't tick the right box, am I right in saying that you may not get in the military and they'll give it to someone else, even though they may not make a particularly good soldier?
Yes, you are absolutely correct in this. The recruiters themselves, they have quotas of, I need X amount of women, X amount of, people from Nigeria. I need X amount of people from Mexico. I need X amount of, people with, of this, but they're literally having to tick boxes to, as they're recruiting, based on how diverse they can make the force and not who's going to be the best soldier.
Is this public knowledge, really?
It's semi. I know recruiters, modern recruiters. It's not really out there, but it is true that this is a focus that in U.S. military, but pretty much across NATO, that they're looking for diversity and trying to make a true universal force, a true United Nations. I mean, go read the Charter of the United Nations from 1946. I mean, there's a reason why the U.S. military is so large. We were chartered and required to do that by the United Nations to be the world police. And you hear these people say, man, the U.S. being the world police. Well, you told us to. That's what's in the United Nations Charter. Now, I'm not a fan of the United Nations, make no mistake. Okay, but there's a reason why the United States military is so large, and it's because we're the ones that are being called on by the UN and by NATO to go and deal with hotspots. But now, how are we dealing with them? Okay, we're no longer dealing with them with men. We're dealing with them with basically people that have been taught how to play video games, and it's an electronic game that you're playing with the components that we have and the GPS guided missile systems and everything else that we have. But when it comes down to it, you have to get on the ground and finish the war man to man, not man to woman. And the thing is that there aren't the men there now to do it.
And touching on the recruiting, so you're saying that the kind of man that you would expect to join the military today is now being put off joining the military today.
Yeah, right. Once their quota's filled, they're filled.
Okay, right. And so what happens to the military? And then going back to our potential adversaries. Yeah. What are they thinking? Are they laughing their socks off?
In one sense, yes, because, the quality of the people that we have, it's just not there. I mean, they certainly respect the equipment that we have. They respect the Chinese are building like crazy. So, Russia's building like crazy. North Korea, of course, I mean, that's North Korea, but in any case, they're trying to match the kind of power that, military power and equipment that we have. But at the same time, they're going, well, you know what, even if we don't have them matched gun for gun, plane for plane, or ship for ship, we have them more than matched soul to soul by having actual soldiers and by having sailors and having airmen that are trained to be men and to act like men in combat, in the act of combat, and not have to be surrounded with women. Because that's just, I mean, it's not going to, when the big battle happens and they have women in combat, the team that has the women in combat is going to lose.
Do you see any positives at all?
No.
None. And you've spoken to lots of military men about this, I'm assuming.
Oh, yes.
And what about your wife and women that are in your life, mothers, aunties, friends? What are their thoughts on it?
We're on the same page. My job is not to grow daisies. Okay, it's to step on them. And okay, I mean, I'm designed. We are men. I mean, the Lord God designed us to deal with thorns and thistles and war, and that's what we're supposed to do, so that our women don't have to. They're not designed for that. They're designed to help to bring the children and raise them and build the household and take the resources of the house and grow them and expand them. And
there must be, Bill, there must be women out there who don't want that life, who want to be in the military.
Well, I know they probably want to, but that doesn't make it right.
Okay, and is it possible for a woman to be in the military, and a certain type of woman, and be as good as any man? Is that actually possible?
Not in combat, no. Not in combat. It's a whole different thing. Women simply aren't designed for it. There are roles in the military, in support, and in logistics, where a man, woman, that's not going to be an issue. But when it comes to, you're there, you're, fighting the battle, do not put a woman in that situation. It will destroy your fighting force. No matter how qualified the woman says that she is, it's not about that. It's about how men and women are designed. And there's an emotional, psychological effect that happens to the side that has women on their side. Instead of working forward towards strategic points, you're now constantly in defense because you've got women with you. It's just part of the psyche, and it just destroys the tactics.
And so what do ordinary people in and out of the military, people who've had experience in the military, feel? The vast majority, Are they of the same mind as you? And if they are, why aren't they shouting about it? Why aren't they asking for things to change? Are they afraid to stick their heads above the parapet?
Of course, because that's just a bad conduct discharge. Okay, if you speak out against the policies that you swore to uphold that were put up by the President of the United States, you are going to face court-martial or non-judicial punishment or something. So no, they can't say anything. They're not allowed to.
Okay, so in your opinion, if things continue on this road, where will the American military be in 10 years?
It's going to be significantly more, specifically weaker, and with even a greater reliance away from the soldier and onto strictly fighting a technological war. And that's the direction the military is going, and is going to continue and go in that direction. They're trying to get away from even having to put troops on the ground. Problem is that you're never going to get away from that. And it's going to move more heavily into the military, at least in the United States, being a place to get an education about technology so that you can then leave and go elsewhere and never actually see real combat. And that's just not reality, and it never will be.
Bill, fascinating topic. I'm going to throw it over to our viewers here, actually, on Over 50s Wisdom. What are your thoughts wherever you're watching this in the world, America, Britain, Australia, the Western world? How are your militaries? Do you relate to this? Do you agree with Bill? Get involved and let's make a conversation, because I think it's a very good conversation to have, because no matter what side of the argument you're on, it will potentially could affect all of our lives come a calamitous war, which, is possible, Bill.
It's not a question of if, but when. It always is. I mean, humanity is still humanity.
Bill, fascinating. Thanks for opening up this discussion. I'm hoping people will really get involved in this. Really good to see you. Cheers, Bill.
Peace.
Peace.